is there, I mean, if you look back in the last 5 years, is there anything in your research process that has changed, or any mistakes you made in the past that, which caused you to change your process?
Yeah, I think for me, probably about 10 years ago or so, I used to get involved with a lot of companies with net operating loss carryforwards. And that was good for a little while, for a few years, and then it kind of got overdone, and companies would basically take over, activist investors would take over these companies with tax assets, and then they would acquire another company, lever it up sometimes, which kind of defeated the purpose because then you wouldn't have taxable income. But anyway, that was kind of the end of that trade. But I think the idea behind that trade is something that permeates. What type of tax arbitrage, for example, as a special situation investor? And then things changed, for example, during once the corporate tax rate changed and went down and things like that. There was a position, I want to say it was like 6-7 years ago, it was the REIT conversion for Iron Mountain, where it was the first, it was held up for a while with the IRS because it was the first kind of non-real estate attempt to create a REIT. And it was held up for a year, but there was a number of arbitrage opportunities along the way with that, with a special dividend and a mispricing, and there were some options mispricings and things like that. And so I think that all goes to, for me, that tax arbitrage idea. That's the foundational idea, but over time, depending on the circumstances, you literally could take different sides of the same, situation, so to speak.
I mean, I think for me, the biggest thing that's how my thought process has matured over time is thinking of businesses in themes or narratives, because that's the way most people think, that's the way most people work. I naturally have an engineering kind of, engineering math kind of a background, and that almost goes to the opposite of narrative, but narrative is how the world works, inspires people, does all that kind of stuff. So for me, it's just sort of incorporating that and thinking about themes and how what companies would basically be able to take advantage of those themes over time. Like a recent example is, okay, well, interest rates have gone up. Well, what does that do to the cash flows of businesses? In most businesses, it shifts tons of cash flow from the equity to the debt. So, okay, that's going to have a huge effect on the valuation of debt versus equity. Debt was basically yielding zero now. Now you can get tons of debt. So what are some ways that you can look at? Examples could be like banks or BDCs, where all of a sudden now you can get like yields, probably going in yields of maybe mid-teens numbers. If you get mid-teens on first lien secured debt, you're just like, okay, the hurdle for any equity to get above that has increased quite a bit.
I mean, is there anything that you've changed in terms of what you read? Or, I mean, there's so much information everywhere now. There's, I mean, we're producing the interviews, but Tigers is, giving you as much information as you want. How are you curating your information flow to?
Yeah, and I mean, again, that's an important piece of it, and it's very easy to get distracted, speaking of Twitter and other things like that. But, you really have to use these resources for what they are and really be disciplined and create good boundaries for yourself. Yeah, for me, I don't watch the news anymore, basically. I just think it's designed for entertainment, and I don't think it's helpful. I think a lot of the political discourse is harmful for your intellectual honesty that you want to cultivate as an investor. So I just try not to. I used to be when I was in college and right after college I moved to Washington, D.C. I went to law school there. I worked on Capitol Hill for a number of years, for 6 years before I was an attorney. And I was really very heavily involved in that. And I'm to the point now where I think it's very harmful to be exposed to as an investor. And so I try to avoid that completely. And any important news that comes about, I'll be made aware of it in some way. So, I'll still read the journal every day. But back in the day, I used to read, 3-4 newspapers a day, and now I don't think that's useful.